thank you very much for being here. Thank you even more so for spending some time with me this afternoon on the stage. I know you've all had very busy schedules and you're running around, so we appreciate it. And we're going to turn our attention once again to the issue of AI. And as you know, and as you've been hearing, certainly the last 2 days here at the Farquhar Sanctuary and in many other debates that are happening up and down the promenade, the race to build and deploy AI solutions is well underway. The question is, does everybody have a seat at the table? How are we ensuring that this emerging technology doesn't become a vehicle for exacerbating existing inequalities, which we all know too painfully exist? Well, to tell us their thoughts on how we can build trust, collaboration and governance, it gives me great pleasure to welcome a fantastic panelist. We are really, really, really grateful for your time. Firstly, Clara Shih. Clara is the Salesforce AI CEO. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
We're also joined by Rishi Khosla, co-founder and chief executive officer of Oak North. Oak North is a neobank in the UK that's doing fantastically well. Rishi, thank you so much for joining us. And Vladimir Lukic joins us as well. Vladimir is the managing director and senior partner, global leader, tech and digital advantage at Boston Consulting Group. Vladimir, welcome. A round of applause, please, for our fantastic panelists. Thank you. So, while we wait for the water, let's crack on. There are many superlatives when it comes to AI. I mean, as an AI outsider, as a journalist, I've been on a big learning curve myself. Bill Gates calling it the most important moment since the invention of the PC. Elon Musk saying it will be the most disruptive force in history. So I'd like to start by asking what AI means for you and for your company. And Clara, I mean, you are the AI CEO for Salesforce. Clara was also named by Time magazine as one of the most influential people on AI right now. So there's not many people who know more than AI than you. So how central is the technology to you and to Salesforce? Where are you positioning it?
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, AI is the biggest disruption in our lifetimes. And for Salesforce, we're really fortunate. We've had AI in our products for almost a decade. Most of it was predictive AI, and we're delivering over a trillion predictions every week on the classical AI side. So it was a fantastic foundation for us to build on. And now we're adding generative AI into every product: Service Cloud, Sales Cloud, Marketing Cloud, MuleSoft, Slack, Tableau. And so it's absolutely central. And what we're seeing it do for our customers is really three things. Number one is automation, especially of the menial tasks that salespeople and service representatives and marketers have to do. Number two is augmentation, improving the performance of different types of knowledge workers. And then third is personalization, both for employees as well as for the ultimate customer experience that we help our customers deliver. They're able to really deliver a new level of personalization.
Okay, thanks so much for that. Vladimir, a global leader for BCG on tech and digital advantage. So you're talking an awful lot to clients about this new technology. I mean, how's BCG positioning it, and what are you telling your clients about the advent of this next age?
Yeah, so personally, I just think it's cool.
You think it's cool?
A lot of stuff is coming together. I grew up, my father brought the first mainframe into our little town. I grew up with the punch cards.
And where was that?
In Croatia.
Yep.
And just seeing all the components over the decades now coming together. The math has been around for decades that we have underneath all of that, but the compute power, the accessibility, the user interfaces is now making it accessible to everyone, right? Now, there's a lot of guardrails we'll need to put in place, and we'll need to learn how to manage it all, but there's no question marks, is it gonna be here to stay or not? So from the just pure excitement of all of it coming together, it's at our fingertips. That's the first message. The second one is just even the last few days talking to a number of executives, everybody is deploying it. I thought it was my microcosm where I live in, that I'm doing on a daily basis, but you talk to the large-scale companies, publicly traded companies, global companies, they all have something in production with Gen AI that is being fully deployed. And this momentum is there, it's gonna continue, and I think we're just at the beginning of a snowball.
Okay, Rishi, I mean, your company is based more predictive AI than Gen AI. You've been in tech for years and years and years as an entrepreneur. I mean, what are your thoughts on AI, and how is Oak North using it?
So as you say, I mean, we built ML and AI into our predictive models really from the get-go, and clearly the evolution in the models available have meant that the predictive capability has got better over time, and I think that continues. And clearly with Gen AI, I think the ability to actually scale that and in a way move away from our credit scientists being the key drivers of those models to a larger population, and then ultimately enabling those predictive analytics to actually go and be exposed to our clients who can use them on a natural language basis, again, just changes the way you can service and deliver for your customers, right? So we're super excited by that. We use our predictive analytics both in helping us. I mean, Oak North is fundamentally a business which helps service scaling up companies and provide them financing. So in helping underwrite and monitoring, but in the monitoring also by using this predictive analytics, you help those businesses get better. You help them see around corners. And the analogy that we give that is that it's almost in the same way that when you're private equity owned, the private equity firms are always running so much analysis on you to try to figure out which way you're going. How can you actually deliver that for your customers through the benefit of Gen AI? One thing which I will pick up, I mean, I think that there has been a lot of talk around Gen AI, around at least what we've seen in terms of our conversations with other companies, either similar size, larger, et cetera, is that the actual adoption of Gen AI is still very much in its infancy, right? We are, 16, 18 months from the launch of ChatGPT 3. So I think there's a lot of promise, there's a lot of projects, there's a lot of initiatives in the pipe, but in terms of tangible outcomes which companies have actually delivered in areas like customer support, et cetera, maybe, but broader, I think more limited so far.
I think that's so well said. It almost feels like we're in 1997 for Gen AI.
Yeah.
And we all know that we're on the cusp of something really big, and it's starting to happen, but the best is yet to come.
And the question is, sorry.
No, you go, please.
I was going to say, the question is, does it therefore become like the internet boom, where there's a lot of euphoria,
yes,
which like anything sort of blows up and then comes back down.
Yeah, the typical hype cycle.
Exactly. And then the adoption curve sort of then starts accelerating.
Yeah.
Well, what's the answer? I mean, is that what you think might happen?
I think it will. I think it's very analogous, except that it's going to happen much faster. And we're already seeing this, I think, both because it's so top of mind for leaders across the public and private sector, and also the nature of AI is that it improves exponentially. Something that it can't do today, you check back a few months later, it might be able to do.
Yeah. One thing that's a little bit different, like as an analogy, they're committing budgets, right? In the dot-com boom, not everybody did it. They were like, let's see what happens, et cetera. We just did a study, over 90% of the companies surveyed said they're putting big budgets in 24, so this year, and they're also in the budgets putting plans for top line and bottom line impact. So it's not, we're gonna try and wait and see. Yes, there's gonna be experimentation, but they're actually putting hard money on it. So it's gonna create that baseload of activity that I think there's gonna be bumps along the way, but I don't think we'll have necessarily crashes in terms of activity internally. We might have crashes and changes on the companies and providers of the solutions, but in terms of the motion within the companies, I think that's gonna continue.
But I think there has to be a mindset change in that regard as well, because if you think about the way that we currently use technology, it's almost like you expect the results to be like Excel, right? i.e. incorrect, right? With hallucinations, et cetera, you sort of say the standards on which I think a lot of leaders and, let's say, risk professionals within organizations would expect the technology to work is at a similar level, i.e. always correct. Now, the reality is humans aren't always correct, right? But I think the mindset change to accept that, and therefore using the Microsoft term, the co-pilot concept, right, on actually, still being on team human, right, but really making human, supercharged.
I want to talk about the pace of change quickly before we move on. Again, quoting Elon Musk, he says the pace of development faster than anything he's ever seen. I mean, is that what you're seeing within Salesforce in terms of the development cycle of what you work on? What's it like right now?
Yes, I can speak for everyone and anyone who works on AI. I mean, keeping up with all the developments and the new models and the new research papers is almost a full-time job in and of itself. And then you think about, especially for large enterprises, most of which we work with, how do we drive the change management from a data readiness perspective, an organizational readiness perspective, reskilling and upskilling, and then a use case perspective, knowing that there's going to be short-term use cases, medium-term change, and then long-term business model change.
Okay, I think we spoke earlier about the cycle in terms of software development. has gone from, what, 3 months to 2 weeks. Is that right?
Well, that's right. I mean, at Salesforce, traditionally, our customers told us that they wanted releases 3 times a year. That was kind of the fastest they could absorb the innovation from Salesforce. And yet, for us to keep up with all of the changes that are happening with structured and unstructured data, which of course are prerequisites for having good AI, as well as the AI itself, from the model layer to the tooling to the applications, our teams are now delivering software every 2 weeks. So it is a much faster pace than we've ever seen before.
What do you make of that, Vladimir? When you're talking to CEOs, I know you're about to, or you've just released a big body of work on this. I mean, are there not inherent risks if you're a leader trying to deploy either capital or embed this technology in your company, your business, and it just keeps changing, or that you don't even know what it's going to be like in a year's time?
Yeah, of course, there's a number of risks, right? But some of them that can be anticipated, some of them not. The second one, you need to build a muscle to deal with them as they arise, right? But interesting examples, even with the software development. One of the risks is if I get better at a step in a workflow, we have great examples where now I can do it for, instead of 10 days, I can do it in 2 days. But the total workflow still takes 14 days. Then you realize you solved for something that was not a bottleneck. It was a parallel activity that is now much more efficient, but the outcome still doesn't change, right? So now you're celebrating the efficiency, et cetera, but if you cannot redeploy the resources to do something else that is actually a bottleneck, that is a big thing. So that's one flavor of the risk. Another one is, as you deploy a lot of these technologies, right, you don't necessarily can anticipate what the risks are going to be. So there are interesting examples with chatbots, et cetera, that go rogue, right? Well, the difference now between 5 years ago, they don't turn off those chatbots. They actually have teams that can quickly fine-tune the prompts. They can quickly fine-tune the responses. They have a legal team that can put the right disclaimers. So the companies are adjusting and building the muscle to deal with these risks as they're arising. So those are just a few flavors of things that the companies are building muscles to deal with.
Okay, Rishi, what would you say in terms of the pace of change that you're seeing right now?
I mean, the analogy for me is going from, I don't know, on-prem software to cloud, right? Salesforce had something to do with that. And the fact that actually your update cycles, right, can actually be every other week, right? Or can be continuous deployment in our scenario, right? Where we're deploying like 40, 50 times a day, right? And as you move tech stacks to that environment, as you move from siloed data to data which is available through data fabrics, right? And going from there, you can start actually, as I said, sort of using natural language, not using code, to be able to manipulate and sort of get that data. All of that enables you to deal with this constant change in the background, right? Because in effect, you've changed the plumbing to deal with that. When you had all this stuff which was fundamentally hard-coded all the way around, you couldn't do that. And I think that the move to cloud has enabled a lot of that, and then the tooling which is being provided on top.
Okay, so we started wide, so I'm going to go back wide as well, just for a minute, if you don't mind, when we move into talking about risks. We know that the force for good in AI is very clear in terms of healthcare and education. It's going to transform our lives. Geoffrey Hinton, who I don't know, I'm sure many of you have heard of him. He's been named as the godfather of AI. Talks that there are risks, inherent risks, could be weaponized, could be used maliciously. I mean, let's start with you, Clara. Do you think people are listening to the concerns he and other people around the world share right now?
I do, and I look back at the internet, and there were plenty of risks that the internet introduced in terms of cybersecurity. And some of those were known and built around. Some of them were unknown unknowns that we discovered later on as the internet matured. And I think the same thing will happen with AI. So I think there's a healthy dialogue around risk mitigation. At the same time, I'm really, it's been amazing to see the work that has been done both on the policy side as well as from a technology standpoint, in some cases using AI itself to mitigate some of the risks. And this has really been the number one concern that I hear when I talk to customers. We had a number of meetings this week as well, is how do I deploy Gen AI safely and securely? And this is why we've developed something we call the Einstein trust layer at Salesforce, which underlies all of our AI. And it includes everything from data masking to ensure data privacy protection, to permissioning, to citations, to toxicity filters, to zero retention prompts, so that none of the context that's given in a prompt to the model ever gets leaked into the model. And so I do think that there are things that we can do and steps that we can take to make sure that we're putting enterprise governance and guardrails on these models.
Okay, Thad, what would you say?
I would say absolutely right. The big shift that I've seen now, I've been doing AI, deploying it at large enterprises for the last 10 years. Huge shift that I've seen in the last 6 months. Every single initial conversation around AI with software vendors has a lawyer and someone from the risk team in the room, from the client. So there is enough, I would say, paranoia and a proper skepticism in the early conversations. So I do think that the antennas are out, right, to manage that, rightly so. Now, the other shift that we've seen is the companies where CEO makes this a priority, right, have 2-3 times higher readiness to deal with these things. And readiness means having responsible AI team in place, legal team that knows how to react to these things, teams that know how to shut down things that are not doing the right things, teams that can identify outliers that should be managed, et cetera, right? So this needs to be a CEO and executive team priority as the first step. But that's been a huge shift for a lot of the companies. And building that muscle takes time, I would say anywhere between 6 to 12 months.
Okay. I mean, as a CEO, a co-founder, what do you think are the risks? Or what do you think your customers believe are the risks, and how are you mitigating?
So look, I mean, the one which obviously gets talked about a lot is bias, right? And if you think about training sets, and then the data sets, and then you think about taking those data sets, using Gen AI to create larger training data sets, right? It's an amplification of the source, right? And how do you solve for that when, by definition, like we can only ever have a certain portion of a represented data set, right? So I think that's clearly a big risk.
And what's the solution? Is there one yet?
What's the solution? I mean, it's interesting. I mean, you read things, again, about the types of things, some of the things which regulators are thinking about, like do you have almost authorized data sets to do initial training of models, and those data sets being, in a way, unbiased. Now, you could take that the other way, which says any human making a decision on something is going to have a bias, right? And actually what you're doing is you're taking that bias out, because now you're not adding that human subjectivity in. But that's one example in terms of, like, is there a way to regulate that? But then the flip side of that is almost the learning capability of Gen AI is limited by the amount of information that there is, digitized, right? And I think the hunger of models is probably larger than that, right? Hence the amplification point. So I don't know if there's a good...
Maybe it doesn't exist yet.
Well, on that point, I mean, I think in the enterprise it's easier, because in the enterprise there are very specific use cases, for example, around customer support, for example, around marketing, sales, et cetera, where we can deploy small and medium models. We don't always need the large foundation model with billions of parameters. And that's what we're doing in our research group, is developing these domain and industry-specific models where we have full data provenance, knowing all of the training data that goes in, as well as the data that gets used to fine-tune the models on an ongoing basis. And something that's been very, I think, important in our development of our models is we have something called sensitive data fields. And we've had this for many years, where within Salesforce, there's certain types of fields, like zip codes, for example, gender, information that companies have about their customers that traditionally have contained bias of some sort. And so we're able to mark those as sensitive data fields and not use them in the training of the models.
Vladimir, you want to come in?
Yeah, I mean, the trick is to deal with this as it happens in the company, right? So take, for example, A/B testing, right? A lot of companies that are on the internet, pure digital companies do A/B testing. Executive teams are part of it every Monday morning for 4 hours, et cetera. It's part of the DNA. Same thing will need to happen here on the bias and making sure the data is right. So we just had an example where we looked at the data set, and one of the colleagues on it said, well, this feels odd, feels like it's biased. I'm like, what are you picking up on? And she picked up on a few patterns, and we said, well, she said it feels it's skewed towards men. It was something to do with resumes and performance, et cetera, right? It feels skewed towards men. I'm like, well, that's cannot be the case, right? Because we put all the guardrails and we put the right ratios of how many male versus female resumes to be in there, et cetera. And so like we put all the right guardrails, but then you go back into data that was being fed. It was the resumes where the names were scrubbed off, so you cannot have designation, is it male or female, so it didn't even trigger this thing. So again, it now trained it on mainly male resumes because that was the majority in there. So, but if you don't create a forum where you can have these discussions, there is no policy or regulation that will deal with this example that I just described.
And
right?
if you don't have a diverse and representative team,
correct,
then
you're not going to pick it up.
That could pick up the signals.
It's groupthink.
Exactly,
Yep.
exactly.
Yep.
And those are like, that's the texture of the conversation. So I get excited when the team on the client side is assembled as a diverse team from different backgrounds, et cetera. But then you have enough of the AI and technical experts that can describe to them the steps, right? So it's not a black box. And then they can have targeted conversations on the signals that seem to be outliers and then go and adjust things, right? But that's a muscle that the leading companies are going to be building.
Okay, that's
But,
interesting.
but if you zoom out,
Yeah,
right, to your
please.
question in terms of what are the risks here, right? I think, at least from my vantage point, one of the biggest risks is just how much control and, in a way, concentration of sort of the Gen AI world is going to be in the hands of such few players. And what does that mean?
On the
right?
big platforms, right, that are...
Exactly,
Yes.
right? And if you think about the internet and search, you could argue the same, right?
Yes.
The implications of how search are used versus how Gen AI is potentially going to be used, I think, are very, very different, right? And I think that's a very serious risk.
Okay. Should we tackle that one, or potential solutions? It's been coming up a lot out here, particularly when it comes to, big three that they're in charge of cloud coverage in the world. And is it going to replicate or be replicated in the AI world? What would you say?
Well, I think that was certainly, it looked like that in the first 6 months of last year. And then when Meta released Llama 2 in open source, and then more recently Mistral, I think the open source model movement has really changed the game in the model world. And it's unclear who's going to win. And my personal view is that there's going to be a mix of public and private models that will be used in different domains for different use cases. And that's probably a healthier industry dynamic than having it all concentrated in a few.
So I'd agree with that from an enterprise perspective, probably, right? But from a consumer perspective, who's going to provide a free compute, right? How many people, how many firms are going to fund that compute, right? And I don't see necessarily a large number.
I agree completely on the consumer side.
right.
And I think that's, we've had a lot of dialogue this week about the role of regulation.
Yep.
And that's probably an area that warrants, further inspection.
Yeah, there's the compute, but there's also the performance on specific data sets, and some of the data sets might be proprietary to subset of teams. I was just with a team from Turkey. They can use some of these tools, it's just not functioning at all, right? Then the team from Japan, they're building custom things with proprietary data sets, et cetera. Compute will be an issue, but the good thing is some of the cloud providers are teaming up with them, but I do think there will be a layer of players that will be, so as a result, the set of solutions that consumers will have access to will be pretty distributed. Now, this is speculation, right? Any one of us, how it's going to play out, right? But I do, in terms of pure performance that I'm seeing out of totally, left field places, models that are coming and performing really well, some of them really small, and they can be applied to a specific workflow, right? Now, how do we de-average that to the consumer that is shopping for some gear versus writing an essay on a specific scientific topic, et cetera? How that plays out, it's going to be interesting, but I'm anticipating there's going to be a lot of different bespoke, domain-specific models out there that you will need to stitch together to have a solution.
Okay. I want to ask you, Vlad, to start with you first, if you don't mind, about what CEOs are asking or of you or telling you in terms of the need to have transparency and have open AI, but also the need to have privacy, particularly when it comes to companies' data. How do you square that circle all the way around?
It's all over the place. I wish I could tell you one answer that all the executives, it's really a segment of one, right?
Yeah.
But there are some patterns. I would say those that are, the conversations are so different. Those that are more digital natives that understand the underlying technology, right? And the whole executive team gets it. The conversations are around where is the friction for a customer? How can we actually move that friction away? How can we deliver something that delights them, et cetera? That's where the conversations are. Those that are not close to it have a different flavor of questions. They're like, is this legal? How much is this going to cost? Is it real? Should we even do this? Should we wait? Should we wait for the software players to release this as features? It's such a different flavor of the conversation, right? And the level of readiness. So like, that just gives you a flavor of the starting point, right? And then depending on that, the third layer is then which country are they in, right? There are countries where they're saying, like, I'm just going to comply with everything and I don't even have a say in what I can do or not, applying on those two segments, right? Then we have countries that say, listen, there is a pipeline of regulation coming, so I'm just going to wait for that to be out there so I can comply. And the third one that says, like, we expect regulations to be limited. It's within us to self-regulate and manage all of this, so they're building the teams. So long-winded answer, but it really depends on which of those combos of segments you're in, and then the flavor is very different.
Okay.
I don't know if you guys...
I'd say from the Salesforce view, I'm hearing four things pretty consistently across the board. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, is around trust. Data security, data privacy, data residency, and it's not even just about data leaking out of companies. Certainly that's a big concern, but even within organizations, if you think about it, different employees in different departments have different permission. And so reflecting the permission model in the LLMs, it's not easy to do, but it's something that I think we've cracked the code on. So that's number one, is trust. And I mean, it's very appropriate that the theme of WEF this year is rebuilding trust.
Rebuilding trust.
And I think AI actually reinvents trust and actually forces us to up the game on trust. The second thing that I'm hearing is around data readiness, because it's impossible to have a conversation about AI without also talking about data. Data for the pre-training, the inclusiveness of the data, the veracity of the data, copyright, all types of considerations, as well as data that's used in the ongoing fine-tuning and improvement of the models. And what we're finding in organizations across every sector, every country where we operate, is most companies have data silos. Right? They're using multiple different enterprise systems, some of which may still be on-premise. They have multiple different data lakes and data warehouses. And so bringing that data together to unify it, to harmonize it, to cleanse it, in some cases to augment it, is critical, because LLMs don't have good memory. And so you have to give context in the form of the prompt and through something called grounding with data in order to reduce the risk of hallucination and improve accuracy. So number two is data. Number three is really around organizational readiness. And these are new skills, and it's also a moving target. And so it isn't just the leaders, not just the CEOs and the executive team that needs to learn AI. Every single person in these organizations, even at Salesforce, every single person needs a new job description. Just like in the 90s, we learned how to reinvent our jobs around search and around email, we're having to do the same thing now for AI, and that's a tall order, the bigger of an organization you are.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah.
Sorry, fourth point.
Yeah.
Yes, excuse me.
Yes, no. So there's the trust piece, the data piece, the organization, and then the fourth one is very important, and it's really around business outcomes, because it's easy to get wrapped up into the hype cycle. But companies are saying they don't want to do AI just for AI's sake. They want to focus on the bottlenecks in customer service and make it so that, for example, they never have to put another customer on hold, and that they can reduce average handle times, that they can improve customer satisfaction, they can drive cross-sell. And so starting with the outcomes in mind really allows us to prioritize what kind of data we need to put in, as well as how we deploy the technology.
Okay. Rishi, do you want to come in, or do you want to go back on this issue of privacy?
I mean, well, just picking up on themes which have been talked about. So the way that we look at sort of deploying AI, ideally deliver customer delight. If it doesn't deliver customer delight, it has to deliver operational efficiency. So like the example that you gave, and you have to be able to actually get a real outcome on efficiency versus like all these like theoretical outcomes, like the example you gave. You say, take a 10-day process down to 2 days, but you can't redeploy the people. You don't have enough volume of that particular part of the process. So it's sort of like, okay, people have that team has more free time.
Yep.
That's not a great win, right? So those two have to be your guiding principles, and they have to help you fundamentally stack rank, right? How you look at opportunities. Your point on privacy, I think, is absolutely key, right? Especially being based in the UK under GDPR, et cetera. You've just got a significantly additional level of sort of regulation around you. right? And also operating as a fully regulated bank.
In a bank,
right?
I mean,
So you've got both those aspects. And we're still, we're pushing to sort of say there shouldn't be anything that we view as off limits. But then you sort of say, how do you keep your data in a way, safe, in a way where you can prove it to the regulators, right?
That's right.
And that's non-trivial, right?
Yeah.
So therefore, you end up biasing to starting with use cases which actually don't touch, like, personally identifiable information, for example, right? So you go to data sets and use cases which are therefore sort of less sensitive. But then if you look at our core, which is understanding the customer, understanding their business in a way that we can help them either provide lending or other banking services to them, and embedding that, right, you have to get into the heart of who and what the customer is. So I think it's non-trivial.
Yeah, and the trick is also, sometimes companies ask, or the board members ask themselves impossible questions and really hard questions. So I was working for a company that runs a fleet of trucks, right? And so they want to do some of this stuff with telematics from the tires, right? But they were asked all these privacy questions and how do you comply with all these rules around private data? And like, there's none of the data in those data sets, right? And as a result, they don't even start working on preventative maintenance or identifying when the tire is going to be flat in their internal fleet of trucks that they have, because a really hard question was put that, yes, should be answered at some point, but the whole data science team stops and they don't engage on it, right? So it's finding, the trick is finding the right balance of how to put these hard questions on the table and triage which ones really must be addressed before we can proceed versus which ones we can address along the way.
And I think it speaks to the need for CEOs, executive teams, and boards to really get smart and have data fluency and AI fluency, I think in a way that was not necessary before.
Correct, fully aligned.
And where are, because you are both all experts, so, but what about every other CEO around the world? I mean, there must be a big range in kind of understanding and knowledge of
Yes,
this
some of them went to
technology.
school last time 40 years ago and never picked up a book since, right?
Yeah,
So like, and they're doing great, and
tough.
the companies are awesome, right?
I think
But it's a huge range.
It is, and I think having, first and foremost, a growth mindset is very important because you're never done. It's not like you learn about something and then, because the AI is constantly changing. And I think what we're probably doing all day, every day this week in Davos and just when we're back home, is spending time with these executive teams, educating them on the art of the possible, understanding the risks so that they can move forward.
Sorry, you go for it, Rishi.
If I could just pick up on that, right? I think a lot of CEOs do have a growth mindset, but I would say there's also a significant amount of passive resistance within organizations to any type of change, right?
We'll just wait it out.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
We'll wait it out, or how does this impact my team? How does this impact me?
Which we saw in the mid-90s with cloud and with the internet.
There you go, right?
How many retailers, how many businesses just were asleep at the wheel?
Right. And there has been a significant structural change in those examples that you just gave, right? So if you think about that, sort of getting organizations to adapt isn't only driven, I mean, like the CEO has some ability, arguably a founder CEO has a little bit more ability, right? But the organization has to come along, right? And therefore, there has to be that openness and willingness of that growth mindset across the organization.
Especially when you read reports, like the IMF had a report out this week saying that 40% of jobs around the world will be affected by AI.
I'm surprised it's not higher.
Yeah, I mean, whether you believe that or not, or whether it affects your companies or not, there's a big job, isn't there, to bring workforces along and retrain. I mean, what is your advice going
Well, we're going through this now. I mean, Salesforce, we have 70,000 employees, and we're both building the product, but we also need to embrace generative AI and predictive AI in every department, from accounting to marketing to sales to customer support to our entire software engineering department. And so, I find it's top down, it's bottom up, and it's across. Right? It's top down because it starts with the leadership team setting expectations and defining what good looks like, and aligning incentives to use of AI. It's bottom up because it's really incumbent on every individual at the end of the day to learn and experiment, have a growth mindset, and start using these technologies. And it's across because I think when we have learnings, both good and bad, sharing them openly with each other kind of inspires and creates this culture of lifelong learning.
Okay, and this is where you come in. This is where you come in as BCG and talk to your clients. So what is your advice in terms of bringing the workforce along?
So there's the bringing them on. The first thing is, do you believe in it, right? That it's important to do. So we did study last year at MIT where our hypothesis was that in the companies where you aggressively deploy automation and some of the AI solutions, the employees are going to be less engaged and they're going to be worried about losing their job and being displaced, et cetera. What we found was opposite. The companies that were aggressively deploying, constructively, aggressively, thoughtfully with right guardrails deploying these technologies had employees that 90% plus of them had high engagement rates. So it was a head scratcher. So we went and talked to a number of employees and said, what's going on? Like, how do you feel? They said, I feel treated with respect. I feel treated with dignity. My company is helping me automate things and silly things I don't even want to be doing. And by the way, I'm super excited to be here because this company is going to be around. They're investing in our future, so I know we're going to be the winners in our space. So it was like a moment of like, whoa, okay.
Is sector specific or?
No, it was across the sector, right? It was, again, over 2,000 companies that we did a broad survey, and then we targeted on those that are doing advanced deployments of some of these things. So if the executives buy into that thesis and they lean in and are transparent and communicate and engage the workforce, we're actually seeing the effect that they're craving for it. And then there is more downside in not doing it, because you have the youngsters who are already doing it. And I was actually surprised. I'm seeing it on two ends of spectrums. The youngsters were saying, I just want to do this stuff because I'm doing it. And on the older side, folks that say like, hey, my grandkid just taught me this thing. We should be able to do this in my piece here as well. The ones that are slower are in the middle. People that are like mid-career, 2 kids, job, all these things. I don't have time to learn these different things. But that aside, they want to make sure you can eliminate and make sure that it's efficient for them. So there is demand, right, from the workforce to do this. But you got to do it responsibly, transparently, and with enough energy and can-do attitude. But I don't know if you guys are feeling the same or...
Well, and I would say co-creation is a big part of it.
Yes.
I'll just share an example.
Yep.
Gucci is part of the Caring Group, and they've been a longtime Salesforce customer. And like a lot of customer service teams, it's been hard to find the talent to bring on and drive retention, especially during COVID. And so we saw collectively an opportunity to use AI to help new agents onboard more quickly, and also to drive to help lift the performance of everyone and automate some of the drudgery of the work. And so engaging the employees in the co-creation process to ask them what they don't like about the workday, what they find as to be the bottlenecks, and focusing there, I think really helped build trust and get buy-in from the teams. And it's been really just fantastic to see how the augmented AI has allowed these service professionals, instead of spending time asking questions, putting the customer on hold, we're able to automate a lot of the data lookup, data entry, and free their time to build deep relationships with the client. And just talking to them, it's been really inspiring. Many of them have said that they feel like they're empowered by AI to do the best work of their careers.
Wow.
I mean, our example there would be, we actually have AI hackathons where effectively the teams, anyone can volunteer to go and effectively spin up a test project, right? And then you're effectively competing against each other on these projects. And that's how we effectively almost like crowdsource from our teams the options, and then we stack rank and choose what we're going to focus on. And therefore, you're not bringing them along. The idea is actually being generated by the team itself.
That's right. They're driving.
Exactly, they're driving.
But as the CEO of a company that's at the forefront of AI, what advice would you give other CEOs about managing their workforce and bringing them along when it comes to this adoption?
I mean, I think it goes to, Vlad, even your example, if I understood correctly, when you went through that, you were looking at advanced deployments situations. So by definition, an advanced deployment situation means that they've been successful in a way, so therefore they probably brought their team along. Yep. So there's a cause and effect point there.
Fair point.
Right?
Yep.
So without bringing your team along, you're not going to be in Vlad's advanced deployment subset, right?
Yep.
So I think it's as simple as that. So if you're not going to bring the team along, and either our view is have the team drive, right? Have the team actually lead you there. Yes, you need a top-down view that this is something which is important, and you need to create the environment for that innovation to happen. But ultimately, as I say, you go into the passive resistance category. You go into all the reasons why not to, all the reasons why this could be bad, versus that growth mindset about actually, this is how we compete, this is how we stay in front, right? And I do think that's easier in digitally native businesses, because in a way, digitally native businesses are used to continually reinventing themselves, whereas in many other industries, you don't have
legacy
that.
banks, which is I know you compare yourself to.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's a world away, isn't it?
I mean,
And in those
please.
companies, like you don't need to tell employees, you don't need to send a memo that they should start using these tools. They're just, if they can deploy it in the workflow, they're just doing it, right? When you need to go and say, hey, here's a memo, you should really consider this, and you should do a little bit of training and consider, it's like the starting point is very different, right? And the trick is transparency, engagement, co-creation, and also focus where the frictions are, either the bottlenecks or a friction with the customer, so that there is genuine desire to do it in a different, better, faster way.
There's a problem to solve.
Problem to solve. Then you can start snowballing off of that.
Yeah.
I just wanted to use the last 4 minutes or 5 minutes to talk very briefly about regulation and self-governance. What a great way to finish. But Clara, they talk about 2024 being the year for governance. I'm sure we were saying this last year about the crypto world. But anyway, 2024 being the year of governance for AI. I mean, what is your kind of hopes, if you've got a message to the regulators around the world, what kind of framework would work for your industry and in your peer network? What do you need?
You know, I have to say,
which country?
Well, let's start with the States. Let's start with the States.
Well, I think that one of the really exciting causes for optimism has been that there's been keen interest from regulators around the world in trying to understand AI, both the promise and potential as well as the risks. And so, I mean, our own public policy team and myself, my team, we've been engaging with the White House, with the UK government, with the Singaporean government, just met with them this morning, and a number of different regulatory bodies around the world. And so I'm actually very optimistic that the right questions are being asked. We've already seen the EU AI Act, we've seen the White House. I think it has a lot of very important elements that I would like to see become actually the law. And I think the opportunity now from here on out is making sure that we engage other countries that maybe not be as far along, and then we start to look at global standards so that we're working together in concert.
Okay, very nice, Vladimir.
As an anthropologist, in kind of wannabe, like I actually love that we're seeing different things around the world, right? So we'll be able to step back and compare and contrast and see how is it influencing the different motions. So from that angle, I'm not in the wait and see. I actually love the fact that there's a lot of dialogue around it. There's a lot of alarm bells being put out there. And I actually am proud of the tech community for actually engaging in a lot of the alarm bells are coming from within the tech community itself. It's not coming from the recipients. So I do feel that the ingredients for the right conversation and development of some of the guardrails at pace is there. Now, how it plays out, we're gonna yet to see, right? But I do feel comfortable around the right folks having the voice and having the conversations. But Rishi, you've seen this play more over.
And you were there at the big UK Tech Summit, had players from around the world and many companies as well.
We were there as well.
Yeah.
You were there, of course, sorry.
I mean,
and what do you think?
The simple fact that the UK decided to do this AI summit, and actually everyone came, and there was very constructive dialogue, and there was a pact at the end of it, just shows the points that both of you made, that there is real engagement, that all players are willing to engage, but there's also very clear recognition that actually regulation is important, right? And actually having this totally in the hands of a handful of private companies may not be like the right result for the world. So again, I'm hopeful in terms of the direction which things are going down.
Okay, so let's finish on that optimistic note, and maybe we can summarize, Clara, with you first about kind of your hopes for the year ahead. I mean, your head must be spinning permanently with the pace of change, but just tell us kind of what your predictions are for the next 12 months, what your aspirations are when it comes to AI.
I really think this is the year of AI adoption and deployment in enterprises. And I think we're already starting to see green shoots of actual business outcomes and successful change management happening, even at very large companies that have a lot of complexity. And so I think that's just going to continue to scale out. There's clearly every incentive for companies to drive greater productivity, greater efficiency. I think this is a time in the economy where we need this type of productivity gain. And it's an exciting time, I think, for workers, everyone in the workforce, to redefine his or her job.
Okay, lovely. Vladimir?
Yeah, I would say it's the year of early impacts. We're actually going to be able to point to impacts at scale, and the year of broader awareness or general understanding of what works, what doesn't work, and what are the constraints that need to be considered, et cetera. So it's going to be a pretty exciting year.
I think that the actual outcomes this year, I don't think are going to be significant in comparison to if you look out 5 to 10 years. I think if you look with that horizon, I think that where we're going to be is somewhere very exciting, hopefully, for humankind. But within the next year, I think there's going to be a lot of testing, a lot of sampling, a lot of specific, case studies and examples. But I don't think we're not going to be there.
The hard yards are now. Well, you've got to get through it, haven't you? Clara Shih, Salesforce AI CEO, Rishi Khosla, co-founder and chief executive officer of Oak North, and Vladimir Licic, managing director and senior partner, global leader, tech and digital advantage for Boston Consulting Group. It's a long old title, isn't it, that one? It's a pleasure. Thank you so much. A big round of applause, please, for our team.